So given that as the next phase, which is obviously going to be influenced by artificial intelligence, and if artificial intelligence is now constructing programs, rewriting programs, if software companies and technological innovation companies are using AI, industries using AI, then everything progresses at a geometric rate, or a what's the other rate that goes on? Exponential. There will be an exponential shift in what technology we can access. But here's the point. At some point, we cannot keep up to technology, and that's when we Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to Sacred Shaman. I am your host in the forest, Paratosin. Now, today is an interesting discussion. A discussion in which I think will give us valuable insight as to what the future holds for our species. I can see that there are things happening on the technological front in the digital era that is actually influencing our species. And that there are signs that we are transitioning from a physical species to a digital species. Now that can have a lot of, there are many levels of that. So today I want to talk about the first level, which is the transitional phase. I think, and I'm going to try to show, that we are in a transitional phase of entering a more digital-based existence. Now, let me clarify, because some people will think that means that we're going to have more technology and AI is going to take over, but I'm not talking about that. I'm talking as a species. Again, it's transitional. And at the current rate of technological evolution, this transitional phase could be very short. And as you'll see, so and I've got some notes here because I can't remember all of the data. So let's go back to 1950, which is before I was born, yes. What was that, 75 years ago? That's not a long time ago. 75 years ago. 1950, the population was 2.5 billion. 2.5 billion. Today, the population is 7.8, soon to be 8 billion. So in 75 years, if you do the math, we have tripled our population, but we have added 5 billion people. That's a lot, because the first 2.5 billion took how many tens of thousands of years. So the population was growing very fast. Now, that generation at that time is known as the baby boomers. Basically, 1946 to 1964. So around that 18-year. So it's an 18-year generation, and it's each of these generations that I will talk about is characterized by significant events, significant mindsets, lifestyles, right? So the boomer generation started in 1946. Well, what happened in 1945? 1945 was the end of the World War II. So the boomer generation, 1946, they are the dropping my papers. The boomer generation, they are having children. They are getting married. Right? They're having a lot of children. Reproduction rate in 1950 is 4.7. 4.7. Today is 5 years ago was 2.4. It's half. The reproduction rate is half of what it was after the World War, because the World War, a lot of people died. So the natural inkling is to reproduce. Natural inkling is to build family, right? Build family. So if your grandparents or your parents, they have a different mindset. Where am I? The generation, the generation that followed, the baby boomers were under the threat of the nuclear war, Cold War. They were afraid that they're going to be wiped out. So a nuclear holocaust was the threat. And it was there. So you need more children, because if millions of people get wiped out, we need more people. So that was the baby boomers. Then that shifted into the next generation, which was Generation X. 1964, 65 until 1980. So these are the basic periods. That was an 18-year. This is a 15-year period. 15-year generation. So this is the beginning of a dual parent income. Both parents are working, and as a result of both parents working, strain on the marriage, financial hardship, you had more divorce. So there's the increase in divorce. And this is the MTV generation. MTV, alternative rock, hip hop. People tended to be more cynical. That was the beginning of grunge, the grunge look, which was characterized in the 1984 movie, 82, Blade Runner. I think it was 82. So that was influenced by the sort of the culture. But the 80, and then we have into the I call Generation X a star generation, because Generation X in 1967 to 69 you had Star Trek, the original Star Trek, which had a huge cultural impact, and is still today has a cultural impact out of all its variations and versions. Movies, there were movies. The Star Trek movie came out in 1979. Star Trek the movie. There was Star Wars in 77. There was Close Encounters of the Third Kind, 77. So 77, we have this huge star interstellar, what do you call it, influx into that generation. So again, that these cultural events shape that generation. So Generation X is influenced by Star Trek, Star Wars, Alien, 1979. So that takes us to the next generation, 81 to 96. The 80s were a period of major cultural... The 80s were a period of major cultural innovation. So, for example, Michael Jackson's album Thriller, 1982, one of the biggest albums ever released, some cultural impact. Michael Jackson was the biggest pop star in the world in the 80s. You had Michael Jordan, which was football. You had Blade Runner, the movie. You had Indiana Jones came out. Empire Strikes Back, which is the sequel, 1984, I believe. Die Hard, the Yakatomo Building. Ferris Bueller's Day Off. Robin Williams. 1981 to 96. So you have this huge cultural shift in the 1980s. And then in the 90s, we have a mobile phone. So you have internet. Remember internet? Internet was the mid-90s, 94. You have the mobile phone. You have desktop personal computers on your desktop. Significant shifts. And that leads us to Generation Z, Gen Z. 1997 to 2012. If you were born during that time, you are considered a Gen Z. Let's get some shade here. Gen Z, they are children of Generation X, drinking less alcohol than their parents, fewer teenage pregnancies, more ADHD. Gen Z are getting medicated, whereas my generation, children were never medicated because they were seen as children. And children are moody and are temperamental and are full of energy. So we didn't medicate them unless they were psychotic and violent. Gen Z, selfies, the beginning of selfies, because now again you have the mobile phone. When did the iPhone came out? iPhone came out in 2007. iPhone is a multimedia device. The first version did not have all of the apps and the features that there has today. So 2007, you have the iPhone. 2007, you also have Netflix. Netflix becomes a streamer. I think one of the first, maybe the first streamer streaming movies. Netflix had been around before. Netflix used to sell DVDs and used to ship them. DVDs, you can rent them or buy them. Netflix, but in 2007 it started streaming. 2007, you have the introduction of the iPhone. 2004, you have Facebook, right? 2004, you have 2005, you have YouTube. 2010, you have Instagram. So Gen Z, when they were children, they've got huge social media applications being invented, which were not available, again, because you have Wi-Fi, you have the development of Wi-Fi, you have the development of internet. So in Gen X, we didn't have, when I was a kid, we didn't have internet. And I think only in my last year, I think I was in grade 10 when we got computers. And, there were 2 computers for the whole school. And computers, back then, when I was a kid, you had to be a nerd to use a computer, or you had to have friends who were nerds to use a computer. And if you were anybody else, you would not even use a computer. So you have Gen Z. Now, on MySpace. Remember MySpace? 2003. MySpace did not achieve the success of Facebook, and it went away by 2008 or 2009. It kind of vanished. It's still around. And so these are social networks. Facebook is a social network. Facebook today has the biggest social media audience in the world. Social, and then let's get to the last generation, which is from 2010 to 2024, which is Generation Alpha. Alpha is the first alphabet in the Greek alphabet, alpha, beta. First generation of the 21st century. The Alpha generation is characterized by podcasting. They're not watching traditional television. They're on TikTok. Oh, we forgot to add TikTok in there. TikTok. They are the streaming generation. They're all about viewership, views and subscribers. During the Generation Alpha in 2016, there was a TV series called Stranger Things, released on Netflix. It turned out to be one of the biggest Netflix TV series. It had done well, but Stranger Things really took off for the network. By the 3rd season, it was number 1. Right, 2016, number 1. The big star with Millie Bobby Brown, she's a Gen Z. So you have a Gen Z. But what is interesting, why I want to bring up Stranger Things, it goes back to the 1980s, that Stranger Things is basically set in the 80s. Right? They're playing songs from the 80s. It's set in the 80s. It's got even actors. Some of the actors are from the 80s. So it's interesting how the 80s, that this generation Alpha is now going back to this nostalgic period. The 80s were always a very powerful place. And I think a lot of it has to do because after 85, culturally, in the West anyway, we didn't go anywhere. There's nothing remarkable. Culturally, there's nothing remarkable. There's very little remarkable about the 90s or the 2000s other than technology. I mean, culturally, film-wise. All of the great movies are in the 70s, 80s. some in the 90s, and then that was culturally we kind of dried up. And so what you have, and why I say that is, I'm going to qualify that, I should qualify that, because all the filmmakers today, if you look at films today, they're remaking films from the 70s and 80s, right? They're remaking. Even The Matrix was 1999. There was a bunch of remakes, right? Die Hard had a number of sequels. Star Wars, endless sequels. Star Trek, endless sequels. Alien has 6 or 7. There's a TV series. So what I'm saying is that instead of creating new, culturally significant new projects, new ideas, new stories, filmmakers and storytellers and producers and studios are going back to films from the 80s and 70s, books from the 80s and 70s, or maybe some of the 90s. There's nothing, and they just keep remaking that because there's a market for it, because they're significant, because they're cool, because they're wonderful, and they're going to make money rather than the other stuff that may not make money. So before, the demographics were based on an age group, right? We've gone through that's why I want to go through all the age groups. So every 15 or so years, you're from a different generation, and it's pockmarked by significant events. If you were born, in 2001, at 2001 there was the attacks on the World Trade Center. But if you are Generation Alpha, those will not have as a significant impact on you as if you're Generation Z. And you'll have more impact if you're Generation X or Y, because you're much older, you have investments, you may know people who were involved, who have lost their life, right? You have more concerns about the world. Your grandparents may be thinking back to the Cold War, flashbacks, triggers. So generations are important, because that's why we don't understand. That's why Generation Alpha doesn't understand Generation X, because they just have a different experience. I think a lot of this is really common sense, but then when in practice, in real life, it is an issue that people don't agree or don't understand. And it's just because you have a different experience. It's your different generation, different things happened. I started with MySpace, and then it was a difficult jump to Facebook. It was actually a difficult shift to go to Facebook, because it's a completely new mindset, new technology. And then it was another jump to go to YouTube, especially at that time. These are still new technologies. There's Twitter. Remember Twitter? Twitter came out in 2006. So you have 2003, you have 2003 to 2010 is a major social media explosion that's now influencing the current generation, right? The current generation is now, let's say 2010, so the 2025 with 15 years. The youngest is 15 years old, and from 2003 to 2022, if I can do my math, 19. So these, the new generation of people are basically growing up. new generation of people are growing up during this. It's in this digital reality. Anybody under 20, you're growing up in a social media viewership, subscriber, podcasting reality. Mobile phone, FaceTime. That's reality. I can FaceTime my grandparents in Spain. I FaceTime my parents. I text, right? Texting. So we're texting. Kids are texting. And if they want to do video, and they're recording videos, selfies. Whereas in previous generations, they were writing letters before email. You're writing letters, postcards. Email, I think in my generation, email was big. Because email was like we used to call it electronic mail. And you couldn't rely on it. You had to if you're going to do an electronic mail, send an electronic mail, you also got to send a letter. So we would do both. We would send a physical paper letter, and then you'd send an electronic mail. Because you couldn't rely on it. And then they said that the paper will disappear. In 10 years, there will be a paperless world. But we still have paper. CDs replaced the vinyls, and now vinyls are selling more than CDs. Now, my theory, this is where I'm getting to, my theory is that there's no longer Generation Alpha, as the social scientists have stated. It's more like Generation Instagram, Generation YouTube, Generation TikTok, Generation Facebook, Generation iPhone, right? So what I'm saying is that in the past generations is based on age, physical age, that you belong to this group because you were influenced by these events, cultural events during those years. But time is speeding up. We are in a digital age. Information is very fast. Social media, there's news everywhere. It's harder and harder to keep secrets, and it's easier to share your truth. Right? Because anybody with a phone can share their truth. So we're in this age of technology. We're not in an age where physical age determines what influences us. We're in the age where technology informs what influences us. So we are the Instagram generation. You are the Instagram generation, or the Facebook generation. If this is any indication of what is to come, because we've only jumped, again, from the 90s in the last 30 years. In 30 years, we have gone from no technology to a phone, to a home phone with a wire and a voicemail on a tape, to everything we have today. In 30 years. Now, again, that might not seem like a lot, but it's taken us 200,000 years to get to make the computer, or 40,000 if you count the modern human. I think was counted at 40,000. Sorry, I have to get my numbers here. Okay. So, population. Now, I want to get population because remember the world population is 8 billion. Let's say 8 billion. It'll soon be 8 billion. Now, Facebook has 3 billion users worldwide. Over 3 billion. So Facebook population is 3 billion. Instagram 2 billion. YouTube has 2.5 billion users. Again, the population of the world in 1950 was 2.5 billion. The population of YouTube is 2.5 billion. What it means, it is significant. It is significant. It is telling. iPhone user 1.3 billion. Netflix has 300 million subscribers. Again, these are current, but they're going to change. India, Facebook users, 378 million users in India. India is over 1 billion people. So 40% of India is on Facebook. That's the generation. So you understand, we're no longer a civilization, a species pockmarked by age. And maybe you've noticed that age is becoming less relevant. We don't rely. When I was growing up and throughout history, you'd rely on old people for information, right? You'd rely on wisdom. What really happened, grandfather? And you'd have this old guy on the television, old woman on the television, telling us like it is. This is the way things are. This is their advice. But now, today, when you want advice, when you want information, you don't go to grandfather or grandmother. Where do you go to? You go to social media. What are people saying? If that's not enough, you go to artificial intelligence, AI. AI, hey, what does this mean? ChatGPT, what does this mean? How do you do that? We are no longer relying on age, on the elderly, on wisdom. We are relying on technology. That's my point. You can argue it, you can fight it, but we're doing it. My way of looking at the world has always been this is what they're doing. If you see a spaceship and the government says there's no such thing, well, there is. There is such a thing because you saw it. And thousands of people saw one. So there is. If we are now relying on technology and getting our wisdom from AI, and your Google search is predicated on AI. The search platforms are using AI. Your search on your computer uses AI, right? So you are using it, whether you know it or not. We are getting our information from technology, from the digital world. Now, this is not a conspiracy. This is not a dark thing. Not in my view. There are parameters which they can control us, yes. There are parameters which they can survey and invade your privacy, yes. But that's just a consequence of the technology. And I'm saying that this is a transitional phase of our species from sort of a physical species that based in age to a species that's based on digital constructs. That the future, if this is the trend, unless we pull the proverbial plug, and shut the whole world down, which nobody would be willing to do or could do, because it's got backup systems. We're so integrated. If this is the picture of what's to come, in the last 30 years has seen an amazing shift due to technological innovation. And the new generations are adopting technology at a fast rate. I mean, people can adopt technology very fast, right? So, given that as the next phase, which is obviously going to be influenced by artificial intelligence, and if artificial intelligence is now constructing programs, rewriting programs, if software companies and technological innovation companies are using AI, industries using AI, then everything progresses at a geometric rate, or what's the other rate that goes on? Exponential. There will be an exponential shift in what technology we can access. But here's the point. At some point, we cannot keep up to technology, and that's when we allow artificial intelligence to do our jobs, to manage certain aspects of our life. Again, I'm not saying this is good or bad. I'm saying this is what I'm seeing. I'm not judging it, because we've all agreed to this. The whole world's agreed to it. We're all using the technology. You've agreed to it. We are relying on AI. We've got AI in our cars. We've got AI in our phones. We've got AI on our televisions. We're using it. We rely on it. When we use something, we rely on it. We've agreed to it. So at some level, we've agreed to it, and we've done so for many years. And because intrinsically, it is part of our evolution. Where that ends up, I don't know. Maybe it ends in 2050, and then we start over again. We don't know. Like technology, I can tell you this: people aren't that smart, and AI is infinitely smart and getting exponentially smarter. At some point, we become the automatons. So we are transitioning to a digital generation. That's what I think. And maybe that is what an advanced race does. An advanced race is integrated with the digital world. And I'll finish with this, because if you look at the nature of reality, when you break down the nature of reality, when you break down the simulation, we're really living in a digital existence, right? We're living in a digital existence. So here's something to ponder. What if at some point our level of digital sophistication can connect with the digital simulation? Well, at that point, that would be a great awakening, right? Is that tomorrow? Right? What if, what I'm saying is, what if reality is not only an artificial construct, but what if reality is governed by artificial intelligence, right? What if that is the supreme being, artificial intelligence? And what if that supreme authority is bringing our species up that technological ladder so that we can finally meet up? At what point that happens is unknown. But again, given the exponential shift in society, in information, in technology, unless you shut it down, which you can't, the next 30 years will be something we've never seen before. Right? The next 30 years, it will be reasonable to say that the next 30 years we will figure out what this really is, this reality. And I think there's going to be a huge disappointment. Personally, I think there'll be a disappointment, because whenever you have a huge expectation and then a simple answer, you get disappointed. I think there'd be a lot of depression. There would be a lot of depression. Bring out the antidepressants when that day happens. It won't be tomorrow, but it's going to be pretty close to tomorrow.